As he leaves the Noble County Courthouse in Perry, Oklahoma, our first look at Timothy McVeigh, the first suspect arrested in the deadly bombing in Oklahoma City.
One thing about the FBI is they never get rid of something that works. They'll change the name, they'll move it somewhere else, but they don't abandon it.
It's been nearly 2 years since the Oklahoma City bombing that claimed 167 lives, and grief has given way now to some very disturbing questions.
Everyone suspected that there was a connection between the bombing, the Aryan Republican Army, and the government informants.
The morning of the bombing, a tire dealer says Timothy McVeigh stopped to ask for directions to the federal building with someone else in the truck.
They went back and interviewed his kindergarten teachers. Now, what the hell good? It's to make a record. We've interviewed 10,000 people. We exhausted all the evidence. Well, you didn't. You avoided the evidence that would have proven it immediately.
All right, we are back again. I hope everybody's prepared for a fire hose because we have Jesse Trentadue back again to carry on from where we left off. And as we dig into this case, which is really so much wider than the Oklahoma City bombing, it gets more and more and more complex. So may have to watch this a couple times. And this will probably be continuing not only in this episode, but potentially a couple more to go. I want to be thorough. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I think I'm doing pretty good for an old man.
Well, good. And is your wife still starting the car for you?
Yes, of course. And your audience has probably noticed I do a lot of mouth gestures. That's because I chew tobacco. I chewed tobacco since I was about 6.
That actually reminds me, I think John Doe number 1, at least one of the witnesses stated that he had a peculiar tobacco habit where he was somehow doing chaw, kind of juggling back and forth between one side and the other.
Not uncommon.
Okay. Well, apparently that is one of the questions about John Doe number 1, because Timothy McVeigh, from what I understand, did not use tobacco products. So I'll just leave that out there because there's so many odd little questions and niggling open ends. I have a show partner, Mark Robert, on another show we do, and we like to call these things dots. There's a lot of dots out there. The dots don't always connect to one another, but there are dots, and we always want to reveal dots. Now, you've got a lot of dots and a lot of things that will potentially connect. And I want to start with one big old fat dot. We kind of closed saying we were going to talk about it this episode, and that is the PATCON's Sensitive Informant Program and Media Control.
Roger Charles, my dear friend, passed away, but Roger found it. He found the document that indicated that as part of PATCON, the FBI set up this program called Sensitive Informant Program, where they would place informants, embed them in the management of the mainstream media. They would embed them in the offices of congressmen and senators. They would embed them on the staffs of federal judges, in the White House, and other agencies, and even on defense teams in high-profile criminal cases. They have an informant embedded in McVeigh's defense team. We filed a FOIA suit, and we said, we want the manuals you use to recruit and implant these informants, embed these informants in staffs of judges, in the media, in other places. We thought they'd come back and say there are no such manuals, because that would be unconstitutional to do that. And of course, we wouldn't do that. To our surprise, they come back and said, hell yes, we got manuals, but you can't have them, national security. And of course, that's a trump card. And if it's going to be played by this Trump and all the other prior FBI administration, that once they fly that national security flag, a judge can't look behind it, basically. But it turns out that apparently, at least it was reported, one of their key informants it was reported, I think, by Judicial Watch, was Chris Isham, who was head of ABC News and went on to be on part of 60 Minutes. And we found the records that said that the objective of these informants basically was in the media either to kill stories that were harmful to the FBI or to dampen them down. But most importantly, if a source came to the media anonymously under promise of anonymity, they would rat out that person to the FBI, who say, I come forward to the ABC News. And I said, look, I got the story on the bombing, but don't let my name out there. On the phone immediately, this is the guy, this is what he's going to do. And it's still, I think it's still rampant today. And
Sure. That's actually been revealed today. Past couple of years, I don't know if you follow social media, but you've heard about the Twitter files that when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he allowed some reporters to go in there and dig out all kinds of files. And it turns out that, Twitter not only cooperated, they had like weekly meetings with the FBI, like, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And then lo and behold, suddenly Mark Zuckerberg gets a conscience and says, well, the Biden administration might have been kind of pressured us into doing some things and spiking some stories, and then, well, now YouTube, then they suddenly have kind of come out and said, well, yeah, maybe we deleted some channels that the government didn't like us to have. So I'm going to argue this is just a continuation of the same program, which probably was founded before PATCON back with Project Mockingbird. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's fair. One thing about the FBI is they never get rid of something that works. They'll change the name, they'll move it somewhere else, but they don't abandon it. I mean, they keep that same play in their playbook forever.
Yeah, I have my father-in-law he's retired now. He was a contract lawyer for the Department of Defense. And in his department, they would change their name like every 2-3 years, like one time they're blah, 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 this, and then next time they're blah, 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 that. And my wife, she asked him one time, she said, why do you keep changing your name all the time? And he looked at her, he said, it's hard to hit a moving target. And I thought about it, and that's actually kind of brilliant because, okay, you're talking about PATCON right now, right? So
Right.
if you confront the government and say you did blah, 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 they're like, oh, no, that wasn't us. That was PATCON. We're MAPCON or whatever they are now. So I don't know what you're talking about. We're a totally different organization. You're crazy.
That's part of the play. I mean, they change the names of these programs all the time.
Now, Roger Charles was directly affected by this program, wasn't he? Because he was working at
Yes.
2020 News and ultimately got fired from 2020 when he revealed on Don Imus that he had put together an entire full package show that was supposed to play and it got spiked. Can you go into that?
Kathy Wilburn at the time, and her late husband, Glenn, within 1 week, figured out the bombing. They concluded there was prior knowledge on the part of the FBI. And Ryder joined that team, and they put together a program for ABC News, I think. It was going to be an hour dealing with that and the fact that one of their informants, Carol Howe, 6 months before Oklahoma City, had gone with, I think, Strassmeyer and the other plotters to Oklahoma City from Elohim City in Oklahoma to scout the targets, and told her handler that this is going to happen. And of course, Roger's sitting down, they're all sitting around the television set watching, waiting for this to run. Doesn't come on. It's been spiked. And Roger gets furious and he complains to ABC, and they tell him just go stuff it. So he goes on to Imus, expose them, and then he gets fired.
Amazing. Now, to follow up too, you had mentioned somebody being on the McVeigh trial, and I'm also doing a lot of research, reading different books, and Dr. Wendy Painting has a very extensive book on Timothy McVeigh, and she's discussing in the book a series of leaks that were going on in 1995. And I wanted to ask you, because there's speculation that some of the leaks were deliberate by Stephen Jones himself to try to shape the narrative and whatever. But it seems like there was a lot of drama within this team. I think there was like 14 lawyers and all these experts and things. Was some of this being caused by an FBI informant? Do you have any information on that?
Yes, Roger and I found some records that indicated they had an informant embedded in the team. But I never saw the name of the informant, but there was a person or persons who were passing information from the defense team to the FBI.
Now, I know you're not a criminal lawyer, but you still are an attorney. You have a law license and you research this. How is that remotely possible? Because from what I understand, criminal defense is one of the most sacred parts of the law, and there's actual civil rights that defendants have. Would they not be breaking the law?
Does the Pope poop in the woods? Hell yes, they were breaking the law, but they don't care. I mean, as part of this whole sensitive informant program. I mean, you think maybe it's illegal to put informants, embed informants on the staff of federal judges?
Yeah, I mean, this is terrifying. I feel like this is almost to the level of the bombing. Obviously the people dead, but
it's
the ramifications.
Due process. It violates about every amendment we had. First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, right to a fair trial, Sixth Amendment. How can you have a fair trial when you've got an informant embedded on the defense team?
And is there any recourse for this? I mean, I am being serious, and I'm wanting to stress and dwell on this because this is something that I feel like everybody should be screaming and terrified about existing.
If you were to find out about it as a defendant that had been convicted, you'd maybe have a chance to get your conviction overturned. In Vay's case, he's dead.
Right. So it's kind of hard to overturn that. And that could be an argument against the death penalty.
The problem is most of them don't find out. And I don't think they do this on every criminal case. I think they confine it to just the high profile ones that like the Oklahoma City bombing and cases like that. And that's and we found too, and that's brought up the whole thing about the iDrive and the S-Drive. If you're a defense attorney in a criminal case in federal court, the FBI gives you what's called the official file. It's supposed to have all the evidence together, good and bad, exculpatory and incriminating. And if you file a FOIA request, they search that same official file for responses. Well, they set up this place called an iDrive until we found it, where they put evidence they don't want anybody to see. They put evidence in there that they don't want the defense counsel to see, and they don't want to produce in the FOIA request. We discovered that, and then the judge ordered them in one of our cases to search the iDrive, and they said, well, we can't do that, Judge. We did away with that. Well, then I put a witness on the stand that says, yeah, we did away with the iDrive, but now we have the S-Drive. It does the same thing. So they just keep moving it and moving it and moving it. The point being, evidence they don't want the defense counsel to have, evidence and information they do not want the public to get because of a FOIA request goes into a space like the S-Drive or the iDrive, or who knows what they call it now since they've been outed on the S-Drive. But there are places where they hide.
Question on that. I'm of a computer background, a networking engineer, et cetera. When you say iDrive and S-Drive, I am envisioning a network drive, as in when you go log into your computer and you're on Windows, you have a C drive, which is your hard drive, and then you have your CD-ROM, which is sometimes the D drive or the E drive, depending on how your hard drive is partitioned. But then there could be files stored on the network, and that will be mapped to another drive letter, and it could be I, S, or whatever. It makes it very easy to move around. I've had P's, I've had S's, I've had, other, letters. Is that what we're talking about here? Is that they just have a network storage location somewhere that they're putting files they don't wish to share?
It is yes and no. As it was explained to me, it is accessible For example, in a case like the bombing case, evidence they were concerned about would go into the iDrive. That was reviewed by people way up the food chain in the FBI, all the way back in headquarters, and they would make the decisions where click, put it in the official file, or click, leave it in the iDrive. So the field agents would gather the evidence, put it in there, and then their superiors and way up the chain would make the decision whether to keep it hidden or release it. So it was a network wide. I mean, it was accessible from headquarters and everywhere else in the FBI, I guess.
Right. That's a typical network drive. And it would just be based on your rights, like if you have the rights to see it or not, depending. Okay. So on that note, again, I'm going to dip into your legal expertise. What are the actual requirements for discovery that they could be potentially ducking when they're doing this?
Well, all the information about PATCON, for example. The McVeigh defense team, Nichols defense team, probably had 3 or 4 million pages of documents produced to them. Everyone suspected that there was a connection between the bombing, the Aryan Republican Army, and the government informants. And they pored over those records. And they didn't find anything. And the reason they didn't find them was because they weren't there. Not that they didn't exist, but just because they weren't turned over. And Roger and I found them later, hints of them later, and went after them as part of our PATCON lawsuits. But they were very careful in making sure that there would be nothing like that that could embarrass them or compromise their case against McVeigh and Nichols in those official files that were turned over. And a good example, Roger found a lead. A lead is a response. The FBI has 56 field offices. A lead is a field officer's response to a question sent to it by the director.
Mm-hmm.
Louis Freeh, the director, in early 1996, sent a request to all 56 field offices saying, look for your bank robberies. Any bank robbery that fits the MO of, quote, McVeigh and his associates, unquote, report. Well, that's the ARA, his bank robbery associates.
Sure.
And we found that and we thought, great, we got them. We file a FOIA request for the rest of those reports. They come back and said there are none. Well, that can't be possible. I mean, each field office, 56 field offices were ordered to report. And none. Well, why they weren't there? They didn't find any because they weren't in the official file. They were in the iDrive or S drive. And someone had let this one slip through. That's how we found it. It was like they slipped through one 302 that talked about the bombing being I think I sent you that one, a failed sting operation involving the FBI and the ATF. Yeah, you won't find a sting operation mentioned in those 4 million pages because they're somewhere else.
Now that you mention that too, and I do, I always want to stress because there's so many people who are kind of bad operators. There are some good guys too, and you're getting some of these documents from good guys in the FBI, from what I understand, or potentially the government who was leaking them to you. Am I right?
Yes.
So I just want to stress that there are good people in the organization who are trying to do the right thing.
Well, for example, someone within the FBI, the crime scene photographs disappeared. The negatives did, my brothers. And one day, an anonymously shows up in the mail copies of the crime scene photographs. That came from somebody within the FBI. Of course, the copies, what was really bad is the negatives disappeared too. And this was back before computers. So without negatives, you can't enhance the photographs. You're dealing with copies of copies and you lose a lot of detail. But those negatives were eventually found, I believe, in the possession of the defense lawyers for the FBI back in Washington, D.C. Now, these are crime scene photographs that are supposed to be part of an investigation, but they end up in the hands of defense counsel 1,500 miles away.
Amazing. And speaking of missing photography and footage, that does kind of lead us into at least your FOIAs, which is for video of the Ryder truck driving into the facility. I think specifically a hotel across the way. There was some footage potentially from their cameras that would have shown everything, like who got out of the Ryder truck, how many, etc. And go on.
It's more than that. We found an FBI Secret Service record that said, as I remember, if I can remember the quote exactly, it's in a close thing exactly. It said, the bomb detonated 3 minutes and 6 seconds after the suspects exited the vehicle. Now that's pretty specific, 3 minutes and 6 seconds. And it says suspects, when McVeigh was supposed to be there by himself. We believe that tape came from the surveillance cameras on the Murrow building itself. And that's pretty powerful proof that the tape exists. But even more powerful proof, as we found that out later and got the FBI records to show it, in 1996, 2 FBI agents were attempting to sell a copy of that tape for, I think, $1 million to NBC Dateline.
Dateline, yep.
And $1 million in 1996 would be what, 3 or 4 today?
Oh, it was $1 million now would be a lot. Yeah.
But, and listen, these guys aren't idiots. Are they going to sell a fake tape to NBC Dateline? And NBC Dateline going to pay $1 million for a fake tape? Nuh-uh. And of course, when we sue to get that tape, the FBI comes back and says to the judge, golly gee, Your Honor, we wish we had that tape. Nobody wants it more than we do. And we just can't find it. We have 1 million files probably, and with some more we've misfiled it along the way, and we'll probably never find it.
Can you sue for a chain of custody?
If I win the suit, it doesn't mean I get the tape. It means I get to go look for it.
That's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, I get to look for it. That doesn't mean I'll get it, but at least I get to go into their files and rummage around and put together a search team, probably.
When did you file that case?
We filed that case in 2008. It was fought tooth and nail. It went to trial in 2014. It's my understanding it was and may still be the only FOIA case to go to trial, because the FBI always wins on summary judgment. They come back and say, hold our hand to God. We looked, Your Honor. There are no documents or something like that. And the judge says, what can I do? I mean, they're swearing under oath. They looked and they didn't find anything. Well, this is the case. We had the proof they have that tape or had it at one time. And so what I will get to do then is if I can prove they didn't do the search, and they obviously didn't, that then I get to go look. Where I look, I don't know. Who knows where they got it hidden? I don't think they destroyed it.
You don't think they destroyed it? You think it exists?
I think they're like Nazis. You know, the Nazis murdered 14.5 million people in the camps, and they keep meticulous records, names and dates of everybody they killed. Well, you would have thought they would have gotten rid of those records, but they just couldn't bring themselves to do it. And I think the FBI is the same way. They got that tape. Somebody's got it somewhere. And
well, there's a copy out there, right? I mean,
there was one, at least one at one time. So they were trying to say it.
Well, exactly. So that individual or somebody associated with them potentially still has a copy. What happened with the sale? Did it fall through? Did Dateline say, screw you, too much money? What happened?
I think that somebody within the organization leaked it to the FBI that the sale was going to take place. And we've seen documents on that. So somebody, as part of this sensitive informant program within the NBC,
within NBC,
out, hey, this is coming down. You better get ready. And so they moved in and it evaporated. Everybody clammed up.
Very interesting. I would be very interested if we could tie down dates. Were there any sudden personnel moves that occurred at that, that particular nexus of time I know you and Roger Charles were very good at finding names out on redacted documents by, location and character counts and things like that. I wonder if it's possible if you could find out when the offer was made, from the Dateline side. I don't know. Do you have any of that information, like testimony from people at that network who said, yes, we were contacted on blah, blah, blah date?
I think we have memos, but they don't have, you see typically there are 302s where they black out the name.
Mhm.
This wasn't anything blacked out. It was just reporting. This is taking place, no names of
Right.
the agents. It's coming out of I think the agents were out of the Los Angeles field office. How they got a copy of the tape in Los Angeles, I don't know, but they apparently did. And apparently NBC Dateline had viewed it, or at least viewed part of it.
Really?
Or photographs made from the tape to verify that they were buying something legitimate. I mean, they're not going to buy a pig in the poke. I mean, they're going to
Sure.
for $1 million. I would have wanted to watch that tape. And I think one of the two conditions were the tape clearly had to show the bomb being delivered, and it clearly had to show McVeigh and the other person getting out of the truck. That was the two conditions they put on it. That tape had to show both things: bomb delivered, suspects exiting.
Which, by the way, I think you pointed out in another interview, and I think it's a valid point. Why the hell wouldn't that tape be shown at trial? You wouldn't have had to flip Michael Fortier. He could have gotten a full sentence for his involvement. No deal necessary, right? We could just say, here, look, he did it. Boom, 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 done. Lock, stock, smoking barrel. Here he is.
Exactly right. It's my understanding they spent over $100 million to prosecute McVeigh. They went back and interviewed his kindergarten teachers. Now, what the hell good? It's to make a record. We interviewed 10,000 people. We exhausted all the evidence. Well, you didn't. You avoided the evidence that would have proven it immediately. That tape would have been Exhibit 1. You're right. That's all you need. Here's McVeigh. Here's this John Doe 2. There's the truck. Boom. You see the truck blowing up. The problem I think they have is John Doe 2 was probably one of their guys.
Or it could be tied somehow to them. Absolutely. And by the way, when you bring up the expenses of the trial and everything they put into it, I think you have another FOIA going on with that as well, which is there were other fingerprints taken, other latents taken on the car that McVeigh was arrested in, ultimately, correct? And the Dreamland hotel or motel, other latent prints from other people.
Wendy Panning would know that. She is the person. She's written a seminal book on McVeigh. She spent a decade, I think, researching it. And she's not a person that researches in the library. She's out knocking on doors. She went to Kingman, Arizona. She went up in the faces of these people to talk to them. I think that's the case. But my experience with fingerprints had to do with the explosives, the detonators. Terry Nichols said it takes a high energy explosive to detonate an info bomb. And that explosive they supposedly use is called kinestic. According to Nichols, Roger Moore, an FBI operative, gave them the kinestic and said, I know you boys will put it to good use. Now, they didn't use it all. And Nichols had some of it stored in a box that Moore gave it to him in his Kansas farmhouse. And the FBI was frantically searching for that box because they knew it would have Nichols' fingerprints on it. It would have McVeigh's fingerprints on it. It would have Roger Moore's fingerprints on it. And I think some of the ARA guys' fingerprints on it. And so when they finally find it, they destroy the kinestic, and they destroy the box, and they take no fingerprints. As I recall from my FOIA request, they said, no, didn't take prints. No. You spend all that time, effort to find that box just to destroy it, not as evidence of others involved.
You brought that up too about building the bomb and the kinetics and whatever. I recall, and there's so much information flowing in. Terry Nichols drew out a diagram of how all this was laid out, the material in the truck, etc., that didn't actually line up with McVeigh. Like McVeigh's description was by some people seen as incompetent. Like what he described would not make sense in what actually happened. But Terry Nichols' description was pretty good. Like, that would be an effective way to detonate and cause the pattern.
You're absolutely right. And the bomb that Nichols supposedly built was not the bomb that blew up the building. It was built in Geary Lake the day before. Terry Nichols described it as such that the fertilizers was so old and gotten wet that it was in chunks. And to make an ANFO bomb, fertilizers consists of preels, like BB size fertilizer, a bag of it, and you coat each of those preels with a carbon. It can be oil or cooking oil or anything. It has to have a carbon on it, but they all have to be coated. And as I recall, Nichols said they went in blue barrels and they were just throwing these chunks in and then pouring nitromethane, I think, on it or something like that. And I spoke with people whose job was to make ANFO, and they said that would never work. You have to use it within a few hours of making it, and you can't let it set for 24 hours, and it has to be coated. And yet at the scene, they find barrel fragments that are white and not blue, like Nichols said. Or blue, Nichols may have said white, and they found blue. It was a different color. And so, no, there was another bomb. Roger Charles believes, and I do too, there were two trucks. One was a decoy truck on which the FBI had planted the transponder, and the other was a truck that contained a bomb. Whether it was the bomb that blew up the building, I don't know. I don't know if anyone will ever know, because they, as you know, President Clinton ordered the building destroyed within 30 days.
I think it was like 11. It was very, very close.
It's 30 days before they could do any kind of analysis on. They could have gotten in and looked at those columns and told you whether they had been blown up by ANFO or high energy explosives. And they were carted off, and I understand eventually buried in 3 separate secure landfills. But within, I think it was like May 29th, the building came down. I mean,
yeah, it was really not long. I do know that. It was shockingly short period.
They barely had defense counsel appointed. I mean, nobody could get in to examine it. There was no reason to take it down. You could just fence it off, keep people out of there. They didn't pose a threat to anybody, other than the evidence it perhaps contained. That would have been perhaps a threat to the FBI.
Well, that leads into another question, and that is kinesticks. And I could be wrong, but I thought that Tim McVeigh never said kinesticks. That he kind of avoided it. And part of why that could be of interest is another topic he didn't really like discussing very much, I guess, was Roger Moore. Well, in that those two are kind of connected. Supposedly every time Moore would come up, he would like start scratching notes, but he wouldn't, he would get really, really cagey about Roger Moore. And I know you've done some FOIA work with Mr. Moore, that there might be a few documents out there about him.
Well, we've Roger and I, we decided when we were looking for the proof that PATCON existed, and we thought the surveillance tape would be it. And so we haven't got that tape. And then we decided, okay, let's FOIA records linking Moore to McVeigh and the Aryan Republican Army. And by that time, when we filed that FOIA request in 2016, we knew about the iDrive and the S-Drive. So we specifically ordered the FBI to search the iDrive, the S-Drive, or any similar drives for those documents. And by that time, we also had, and it's highly unusual, we had, in fact, the only time I've ever seen it, we had an order from a federal judge to the FBI said, you better not lie. I think I sent you a copy of that order. Can you imagine that? Don't lie to me under oath. But so now they come back, and this is significant. They come back in 2016 and they say, we have 67,373 pages and 3 CDs of media, quote, responsive, unquote, to your FOIA request. They didn't say approximately 67,000. They give an exact number. And why responsive is important is, in all my years of fighting, every FOIA response I've seen, they always come back and say, we have 10,000 potentially responsive documents. And then they take a year to look through them and they come back and say, well, We looked at the potentially responsive documents, and there were only 4 that were responsive, and they're exempt by national security. But this one, they didn't claim national security. They didn't say potentially responsive. They said 67,373. And so we went after them. And then after Roger passed, I sued them in 2024 to get those documents. They came back to the court and said, we'll give them to him. We want to do it at the rate of 200 pages a month, which would have taken 20.2 years to get them. And I said, hell no. So I go back to the judge. We get in a big fight. And the judge says, no, you're going to process them at 2,000 pages a month and release them, which means I'll get them in 2.5 years. Not 20, but
Have you been
I would
getting
not
them?
have.
Have they
Well,
been
not
coming
without
in?
a thing. They've been coming in, but nothing that's responsive. In other words, they have 67,373 documents missing, McVeigh, Moore, and ARA. I think I got 5 that actually mention those guys. The rest of them were filler. So it'll be a big fight at the end over those. But
Well,
you know,
I'm sure that those
I'm
would be the 373 at the end.
yeah. But I don't know if I'll be around to see this fight through, but fortunately I have 2 people that you've interviewed. Roger Charles thought world of them. Will pick up the fight. One is Dr. Wendy Painting. This still falls right in with her next book. I understand she's writing on Moore. She will get those documents and plus my PATCON documents. I probably have another 30,000 PATCON documents. And the other person is Ken Silva, the investigative journalist for Headline USA. He's the only person who's ever written about PATCON. The only one, I mean, in the media. And he'll get that too. And between those 2, they'll chase that story till they get to the end. And I think it's my firm belief. As I said, dozens of lawyers that poured through the Ray defense file, the Nichols defense file, found nothing. That's because I believe my heart of hearts, that evidence is going to be in these 67,373 pages and 3 CDs. And because it's out there, everyone knows. I mean, in fact, Dr. Panning found, I think I sent it to you too, it was the first significant reference. It said, in the bombing case, they were transcribing tape-recorded, I think it was secret tapes, mount wires, that would obtained as part of the Operation Punchout. And of course, that was Moore.
Now, what is Operation Punchout?
Operation Punchout, and I think it's much broader than I originally thought. It was supposed to be centered in Utah, where they would set up a sting operation where they would lure airmen at Hill Air Force Base into selling government property to who they thought were foreign governments. And these were airmen in desperate situations. They had sick children, needed money. I mean, they preyed on them to get to do this. And of course, it was all set up in a sting. But then you see Punchout, I think, went bigger than that, because you see immediately Moore and McVeigh are hooked up traveling the gun circuit, where they're selling stolen military weapons parts for M16s and stuff like that. So it's a natural progression to roll into that. And I think, but the fact that they have linked Oklahoma City to Punchout tells me more, and his involvement in both operations.
Now, Timothy McVeigh, I believe early on and at different points stated that, he was recruited for a special military operation, infiltration into, different fringe groups, etc. And he was working for an individual known as the, quote, the Major.
That's what he claimed. And Nichols said that too, that McVeigh let slip that he, in fact, was working for the government. I don't know if that's true or not. It's plausible. Who knows? It has to be the quickest execution in the history of this country, other than lynching. I mean, no appeal, just boom, executed.
Yeah, there's some real questions, and I keep harping on them. And I just talked with Ken Silva, who you just mentioned a bit ago, and I've brought it up with others. It's always troubled me how McVeigh could be very careful and methodical and stupid in the same exchange. As an example, when he checked in at the Dreamland, he used his real name. He went and rented a vehicle using a Robert Kling ID. He even ordered food from the Dreamland using Robert Kling, the fake name, but yet he registers using a real name and a real address that would tie back to him, somebody who actually existed, who would know him. Now, somebody wrote in saying that Timothy McVeigh was known, and somebody working at the hotel or near it knew him on site because of Fort Riley, and that's why he gave the real name. I'm not sure, but I found these discrepancies to be odd. That
Well, and Nichols verified that. And again, a lot of the tribute goes to Margaret Roberts. In this fight, it was Roger Charles and Margaret joined us early on. And when Roger passed away, if I had serious questions about the bombing of McVeigh, I'd go to Wendy Painting that I didn't know. And but Margaret is the only journalist that's gotten in to interview Terry Nichols. She interviewed David Paul Hammer and Peter Langan, who was one of the leaders of the ARA. She went in as my paralegal, and I laughed. I told her why. I said, Margaret, these men, it's been 3 decades or 2 decades since they smelled a woman. They're not going to see you get the scent of a woman again. You're highly intelligent. We're going in there and they're going to talk. And sure enough, they do. Where if I'd gone in, or I'd taken it by myself, or if I'd sent in the mail as a paralegal, they'd have clammed up, wouldn't say anything. But they talked freely to Margaret. As I said, she moves this story forward considerably with those, those interviews. But no, and Nichols pointed out, he said, why, for example, does McVeigh drive around with that Mercury with no license plate? And it wasn't followed up. Nichols said the license plate they left back in the storage shed, I guess, in Kansas. And after the bombing, he took and buried it. Or threw it in the river or something like that. But what idiot does that? Was he smart like a fox or a true idiot? I don't know.
Yeah, and again, because we can't ask him, it really, there seems to be more questions than answers the further you dig into it through motivations and whatever he's doing.
But Nichols said something that made it sound plausible. When Nichols went to the Philippines, he was trying to escape to get away to sever his ties with McVeigh. He came back, and I think he went to visit his family. I can't remember. I think Margaret has her book. May have been in Nevada, wherever. He's in a motel, and McVeigh calls him. Now, how the hell does he know he's in this motel in Nevada? But he said McVeigh would call, as though somebody was watching Nichols and telling McVeigh exactly where he was, so he could reach out and touch him anytime he wanted to.
And the theory, would that be Roger Moore potentially,
or someone within the Bureau?
Now, a question on that too. I want to circle back to Roger Moore again, because I think it was an interview, but it was mentioned that Roger Moore was not technically robbed by Terry Nichols. Like they played it and the government claimed that he was robbed, but it was, I think according to Nichols and others, that he handed them all this stuff, to supposedly raise money for their operation by getting a bunch of weapons. And you and I have discussed before that the ARA, the idea of robbing the banks and recording the serial numbers and then spreading it out amongst the group so they could follow the money, led into the future of Fast and Furious, which is seed the public with a bunch of guns, follow those guns and see where they take you. Could it be that the robbery of all those weapons to raise money for the operation was in fact Fast and Furious 1995 or 1994?
Well, it's certainly out of the same playbook, but an even more disturbing story is the ARA, the Aryan Republican Army. One of the members of the ARA was Sean Kinney. He was an FBI informant. In fact, he even had the television show highlighting his documentary, his role as an informant for him. Peter Lang, as I said, was recruited by the Secret Service. There's some indication that Richard Guthrie may have been CIA, but the point is, John Matthews, who had been a key operative in the PATCON program, said that the ARA was a front created by the FBI. And part of the things that we're doing was following the money. They would take an undercover operative named Dave Rossi, who was a real FBI agent, but that's not his real name, according to Matthews, would show up at these militia meetings, hand out this money to the various groups to see where it's going. And then we have a police officer, a great guy named Matt Moning in Cleveland. Cincinnati. He had been following the ARA in the robberies. He goes into the FBI and says, what the hell are you people doing? Sean Kinney, Richard Lee Guthrie, Peter Langan, they've robbed 22 banks in an armored car. Here's the evidence. Why don't you arrest them? And the FBI tells him, we're following the money. We're going to see where that money goes, and we're going to make a massive arrest nationwide and take down this whole group. And you better get out here and shut up. And of course, Matt Moning wouldn't. And of course, they trumped up a computer crime. He supposedly
I was going to say, yeah, didn't.
misuse of an office computer convict him and destroy his career. And he wouldn't shut up. He kept saying, somebody's going to get killed. These are serious robberies. These are not fake guns. They're going in with bombs and automatic weapons. And here's the proof. In fact, one of their wives even ratted them out and said, yeah, they're doing it. I mean, so I guess he'd come home and a dye package has exploded all over his clothing or something like that. So but it was follow the money, follow the money, follow the money, which is exactly what Matthews said they were doing.
Now, can we follow the ARA a little bit and follow them to Elohim City? And
Elohim City is
what was
they call it, didn't they call it Alphabet City? Because every federal agency with an ATF, FBI, CIA, they were all there with their informants.
That's homecoming.
So, I mean, everybody was an informant. And, but no, I think it's pretty clear, and Roger concluded that, and so did Kathy Sanders. The plot came out of there, and the FBI knew it because their people were part of the plot. And, but they run away from Elohim City once the bomb goes off. I mean, it's like, Elohim, where's that? I don't know anything about Elohim City.
Now, to follow up on Elohim City, I believe some months before April 19th, there was supposed to be an ATF raid on Elohim City, and through a joint meeting with the FBI, ATF, and I think Justice Department, the FBI put a kibosh on it and said, oh, hell no, we don't want another Waco. What the hell are you doing?
I think they called it off.
Mm-hmm.
They called it, whatever reason, the FBI called off the raid. And that would have nipped a bombing plot, I think, in the bud. And as far as informants, hell, the Southern Poverty Law Center had an informant, at least one or maybe more at Elohim City, that according
Can
to
we
the
talk
FBI
about them? Yes, that's actually, you know what? That's a great side subject. Somebody who I plan to interview, his name is Kirk Lyons, and he is a lawyer who has worked with a lot of, I'll just say fringe groups. I don't have a good, overall name, but for many, many years, he's sort of been a living witness from the sedition trials with the order in 1983. He sat right next to Richard Snell during those trials, and then onward to Ruby Ridge. He knew Randy Weaver. Randy Weaver was at his wedding. There's definite ties there. To Waco, he was trying to do work there. He's Andreas Strassmeyer's attorney and friend, and also another interesting character, Dave Holloway, who he's kind of like, I don't know, Roger Moore adjacent, like maybe they knew each other or worked together potentially for a letter agency at some point. But Kirk Lyons calls Morris Dees his unofficial biographer. And Morris Dees founded the Southern Poverty Law Center, which from what I understand was to, help poor people with, legal things, whatever defenses. And somehow it got turned into an anti right-wing organization, pretty much against anything deemed as right-wing all the way to extremist, whatever, to the point that he had an informant at Elohim City. Can we
At
talk about
least
that a
one.
little?
Yeah, there's a FBI memo from headquarters, January 6, 1996, I think, January 4th, 1996, reporting that I think the report came from a Southern Poverty Law Center informant at Elohim City that 2 days before the bombing, basically, McVeigh had called Elohim City looking for Strassmeyer, and the supposition, I think, was he was looking for help. But it says Southern Poverty Law Center all over it. And interestingly, J.D. Cash wrote about this. He was at Eastern Oklahoma State University, I think, in 96, and Mr. Dees was speaking, and Mr. Dees made the comment that 6 months before the bombing that they had warned the Department of Justice that it was coming. And nothing was done about it. So that information would have had to come out of Elohim City. It would have had to come from their informant there. Who he was or she was, I do not know, and there could have been more than one. But the memo clearly says Southern Poverty Law Center informant blank. They blank out the name. Had this report basically.
So what is the Southern Poverty Law Center, and why are they dealing with informants? I don't think they're a government agency, are they?
No. And it could be a cutout that the FBI could use or CIA could use an entity like the Southern Poverty Law Center to spy where they couldn't do it themselves legally. In other words, it may be illegal for them to wiretap and do all this other stuff on citizens, but private citizens, the same constitutional prohibitions don't necessarily exist. So you can have someone else not subject to the same constraints you are carry out your operation, which is not uncommon.
What have you discovered about them and everything, in all of your FOIA requests and research, etc.? And by the way, also Morris Dees, I guess, was fired from the organization in 2019.
I don't know much about his firing. I do think the basic, my knowledge is instinct, and I guess just hillbilly common sense, that when I started this FOIA fight for these PATCON records, all at once, the intelligence, he was director of intelligence or something like that for the Southern Poverty Law Center, starts calling me. And Andrew Strassmeyer starts to contact me. And it was obvious to me there was a fishing expedition to see, what do you know? What is in these records? The concern was, I think, that I was going to find something there that was going to be very embarrassing to them. And they never said what it was or hinted to me what it was, but it was clear to me that they were worried. They were as nervous as a cat in a round room that I was going to come up with something. And eventually, I think I will.
I did not know that Andreas Strassmeyer had been calling you. Was he calling you directly or Kirk Lyons
Kirk contacted me about the same time. And then Strathmire reached out to me through his girlfriend. And a nice person. And she kept saying, well, Andy wouldn't do this. He said he didn't do that. And he'll tell everything. I said, okay, I'm going to send him a privacy waiver for FOIA. If he can sign it, I can get all these records. She said, I'm sure he'll sign it. He got that privacy record. It was hell no, that waiver. Hell no. I think I sent you a copy of it. It said, hell no, I'm not going to sign this. All it said was, give Jesse all my records. And he went about to do that.
All right. So before we go, because he is a major subject, and I will be discussing him with Kirk Lyons. There's some real questions about it. Who is Andreas Strassmeyer?
Oh boy. Well, he was from a prominent German family. Now, this is my understanding. Ken would know more. His father was high up in the Willy Brandt government. He was a German officer, and I think an intelligence officer. He had a Jewish girlfriend. They vacationed in kibbutzes in Israel. He shows up in Elohim City as a vehement neo-Nazi, anti-black, anti-Jew, in charge of their security, weapons training, and all this other stuff. And you say, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, somebody comes from a prominent family like that, and now is a rabid neo-Nazi. And I think he's a plant. Roger Charles was able to document that he was over here as a CIA asset, and I think Roger said he was on loan to the FBI.
And I definitely want to hear more, because I've heard some interviews from Andreas, and he plays it down. He said that his father was nothing more than a bureaucrat, not a big deal. He wasn't even, national level. He was kind of a city level guy. And occasionally people go to the city, but it's no big deal. He really plays down or denies any kind of great connections or anything else. So
the minute the bomb goes off, he takes off for North Carolina. And before the FBI can question him, he's flown out of the country by Dave Holloway, who was a former CIA guy, and back to Germany. When the FBI finally gets around to interview him, it's my understanding they call him up in Germany and say, well, Mr. Strassmeyer, did you have anything to do with the bombing? He says, of course not. Thank you very much. That's all we needed to know. Goodbye.
Close out. I'm going to talk about Terry Nichols and Congressman Rohrbacher. I think that's how you say it.
That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
The only member of Congress to help us was Congressman Rohrbacher and his chief of staff, Kathleen Stanton. They were my mother's he was my mother's congressman. He jumped on this. He fought tooth and nail for us. He finally he was on the Judiciary Oversight Committee to let him investigate. And Terry Nichols wrote to him and wanted to talk to him about John Doe 2 and the bombing. Well, I think I sent him to you. The FBI was panicked. They were afraid that he was going to tell Rohrbacher who John Doe 2 was. And of course, they won't let Rohrbacher meet alone with Nichols, so Nichols won't talk to him. He can't talk to him. Well, then Rohrbacher tries to talk to the ARA guys, and the FBI won't produce them. And Congressman Hyde would not authorize, as I recall, Rohrbacher to use subpoenas on the FBI. And I wish to God I could remember who told me this. It's been 25 years or more. I was told that Hyde made the comment that he wasn't going to let the death of an inmate compromise the United States' role with two of its most important allies.
Now, who were the allies? Is that the Philippines and Germany, or who?
I think my hunch, Germany and Israel. They were in great angst over the emergence of the neo-Nazi movement in this country. I mean, they were in a panic state over that. And I think they would have done anything and they could to stymie it, to monitor it, to investigate it. And I swear to God, I can't remember who told me that, but it says that's 25 years ago, and I hadn't put all these pieces together. To me, I wouldn't have included, it made no sense why it would have, at the time it was said, what effect my brother's murder or investigating my brother's murder would have meant on the bombing. on allies overseas.
Well, now I wanted to ask that because I mean, Rohrbacher wrote a pretty extensive report about Terry Nichols and his time in the Philippines, which overlapped with Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
I know. I talked briefly with Mr. Nichols about that, and he denied it. I don't see why he would lie to me. I mean, he could have, but I don't think he did. And Lord, what's he gained by that? He's already spending the rest of his life in prison. It gains him nothing. If anything, if it was true, he could probably use it as a bargaining chip to get some kind of preferential treatment like this Maxwell did, I guess, in the Epstein case or whatever it is.
Well, he is with Ramzi Youssef now. I mean, aren't they like just down the hall from each other?
I guess so. And if you've ever been in there, like Margaret and I have, the men in there come out dead. I mean, there's no parole for these folks. They're there till they die, and it's a bleak place.
Yeah, it's 80 X Supermax or ADL Supermax.
ADX, they call it. Supermax ADX.
And it's in Florence, Colorado, I think, something like that. Okay, well,
you don't even have windows. You spend all your life in that 8x10 or smaller cell.
Yeah, I mean it is the well, it is Supermax. It replaced Alcatraz, I think, correct?
Yes, but I guess we're going to reopen Alcatraz.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but anyway, that's fine. I guess we like to spend money on things. Well, Jesse, this has been fantastic, and we actually covered more ground than I thought. We kind of circled around, but
I think we hit about everything I had on my notes. The only things I think we've got it all.
Which is amazing. I would love to have you come back. I've already got Kathy Sanders is going to be doing, but I'd love to bring you on with Kathy Sanders and Margaret Roberts and you. We have kind of a neat super panel live stream and kind of compare notes and thoughts and things like that.
I'd love to. And as I said, Kathy and her late husband Glenn, figured this out within a week of the bombing. And they said prior knowledge. They knew it was going to happen, and you don't stop it. And then you have to say why. Did you want it to happen, or was it a screw up?
That's the truth. Amazing work. Well, we will look forward to that. And Jesse, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.